Welcome to Ask Caleffi, the podcast that dives into real-life problems that plumbing and HVAC technicians face in the field. We're your hosts from the Caleffi Tech Support Team. I'm Greg Tubbs.
And I'm Dan Furcus. Welcome. We look forward to sharing some stories from our tech calls and using our background and expertise to make your days a little easier.
Hey there, welcome back to the Ask Caleffi podcast. How we doing, Dan?
Doing good today, Greg. How are you?
Oh, can't complain. We got a new face in the studio today. And
the tech team is expanding.
Yeah, we got a little
Not
bigger.
just our waistlines, Greg.
No. Speak for yourself there, Cookie Monster.
I'll start walking to work.
Yeah, might have to. So with us today, we got our new coworker, Matt, the new voice of the tech support line. How we doing, Matt?
Good, Greg. How you doing?
Yeah,
Good.
Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
So you're new here with Caleffi. You left the field. What can you tell us about your experience in the field?
Well, I've been a plumber in the local 75, southeastern Wisconsin, for about 14 years. I started my apprenticeship in 2008. Was with one shop basically my whole apprenticeship. Then when they went non-union right before I was ready to write my Journeyman, I've been with my last shop for basically the last 9 years since then.
Sure. So you were pretty well indentured into that shop.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it.
Cool.
Yeah, good. It's great to be with a good company. So 2008, tough time to jump into the trades.
Absolutely. Yeah. I started my apprenticeship. My indenture date is actually August 4th, 2008. And if we all remember September 2008, when the bottom fell out of the market, construction basically stopped for months. And that first shop that I was with, I mean, this was all of my experience plumbing. You know, I had zero. And in fact, that worked to my advantage because my boss at the time specifically asked the hall for somebody with zero experience that they could build from the ground up that didn't already have their own, oh, I've been doing this for 6 months. This is how you do this,
Yeah.
So that kind of worked to my advantage, in fact. But yeah, I mean, it was a lean couple of years there.
Yeah, tough couple of years, but probably a good time because you're not running 100 miles an hour. You actually, and from your old boss's standpoint, a great time to get somebody without the experience because you actually have the time to train them the way you want and build them and teach them the way you want that to be done. Probably really smart that way. It was a great time to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's kind of how I started. I had no experience other than my tech schooling, and I had several offers, and the one I took, they seemed to be happy with bringing on a guy that didn't have all that experience.
Yeah, sometimes you're better off to groom them, groom someone and train them the way you want it done than to try to correct, habits that are already built into them.
Or help them unlearn bad habits that they've already come.
Right. Or just to make it done the way you want it done.
Sure.
So you got out of the field and you're here now. How'd you find out about this job?
Basically, I mean, I wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't searching. I love plumbing. I love the company that I was working for.
It's kind of how that goes.
Yeah.
I know.
You find something when you're not looking for it.
Exactly.
Sometimes you find the best thing when you're not looking.
Yep.
Yeah. And I this opportunity just kind of fell in my lap. And the more I thought about it, the more I, talked about it with the family. And I was like, this might be a really great transition.
Very cool.
Yeah. I suppose you start to look at, you hit the journeyman level, you've got your time in, you're running jobs, and, you kind of look at it and go, okay, what's my next challenge?
Sure.
What's my next opportunity?
Kind of exactly where I was at. Yep.
In some places, you don't get that next opportunity or that next challenge, or if you do, it's only because you've been injured and you can no longer perform in the field.
Right, yeah, and at that point, they're finding something else to be able to keep you on. But, I mean, if you're like us, another opportunity, another chance to learn and grow, I mean, definitely enjoy that.
Absolutely.
So now that we know a little bit about your technical background, what else can you share with us about you?
Well, I mean, I'm 39 years old, like Frisbee golfing, hiking, kayaking, stuff like that. Real big Brewers fan. Sitting basically in the parking lot of one of my favorite places on the planet right now.
A great place to be all day.
Absolutely.
Especially as a Brewers fan.
You bet.
Unless you're trying to leave after a day game.
That's kind of rough.
Yeah.
But yeah, big Brewers, Packers, Badgers fan. Basically just like hanging out, taking it easy when I'm not working.
Yeah, sure. You've been here for a few weeks now, taking some phone calls. what's one of the biggest things that's kind of popping out at you about the phone calls, the type of phone calls we get, and maybe one of the biggest ones we get?
Well, I mean, one of the main things that I've noticed over the last couple of weeks taking phone calls here is, obviously being summertime, they're more plumbing related, but those plumbing related ones tend to be revolving around oversized mixing valves.
A very hot topic.
Yeah. I mean, it's 40% of the calls that I've taken are regarding, especially like a Legia mix. While it's hunting to try and get that set point, it tends to be because it's oversized.
Yeah, it's a pretty common theme that we see. What's interesting is you start asking questions, trying to uncover how it's sized or how it was selected. And, it's pretty amazing that, when you ask what the design flow rate is of the project, a lot of guys just don't know.
No, they don't. You ask for, a design flow rate of the project, and it's crickets on the other side.
Talking about sizing, that reminds me of a tech call I took. And I know I've shared the story before, but had a contractor working on a commercial building in Tennessee, and it had an 1.5 inch Legio mix that he had installed. And he was having issues with temperature stability and maintaining, obviously consistent temperature. So I started asking questions like, what's your design flow rate for the space? Well, he didn't know. So, it turned out it was a hair salon with 30 studios in it, and each one of them had a head washing station that needed about 0.5 gallon per minute. So then we started talking more, and I asked him, what's your source? Well, he had 2 tankless water heaters. And I'm like, okay, well, what are the tankless water heaters capable of providing? And he's like, well, each one is capable of providing 11.5 gallons per minute of hot water. When I look at that 1.5 inch, Legio mix that he installed, that's got a really high design flow rate.
Yeah, so the top end flow rate of that at 20 PSI drop is 152 gallons a minute. So that's one check against you.
Yeah, well, and you look at the design flow rate of that.
That's 93.
93 gallons per minute design flow rate.
So in design flow rate, when we say design flow rate, that is where that valve will work most effectively.
Yeah, that's where that valve's the happiest.
It hunts the least.
Yeah.
It modulates back and forth the least.
Yep. So I asked him, I said, okay, how was that selected? Well, it was selected based on pipe size. So here he's got an 1.5 inch electronic mixing valve, and his source water heaters can only provide 23 gallons per minute.
Sure, and in a worst-case scenario, if everybody's getting their head washed at once, it's 15 gallons a minute requirement, essentially.
So in that, I recommend it. We drop down to a 3/4 inch. Our 3/4 inch has a design flow rate of 27 gallons per minute. So if your water heaters are only capable of providing 23, you certainly don't need an 1.5 inch Legio mix.
No, that thing's going to hunt like crazy, which it was doing.
Exactly. So, the benefit in that application is, all of our electronic mixing valves use the same control. They use the same actuator up to 2 inch. So for him, all he had to do was change the valve body and tailpieces and repipe the valve body itself.
Well, that worked out cheaper than what it could have for him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was at least a little easier solution for him.
Absolutely.
But that's where, we spent a lot of time on the phones talking the guys through determining what your design flow rates are and then picking a product to match that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I can speak for, as a plumber, though, that's just kind of how I would do it. It was 1.5 inch pipe. You're going to put an 1.5 inch valve in. Well, when you actually get down and look at this literature, odds are that's going to be oversized, depending on what you're all serving, but it's very, very possible, I'd say even likely that it is.
Right. Well, and, when you look at our Legio mix, that's a 3-way ball valve. That has a very high CV.
Yeah.
Right.
So very, very high CV ratings. So if we even have guys that'll come in and they tell us, okay, I took out a 2-inch thermostatic and I put in a 2-inch electronic. Well, thermostatic mixing valve and electronic mixing valve, their CV ratings are going to be quite a bit different.
Yeah, you're not apples to apples at all there.
I mean, you look at our 2-inch thermostatic, that has a 13.5 CV. You go to our 2-inch Legio mix, what's
48?
Yeah, 48 CV.
That's a huge difference.
That thing is huge. No, so it's just important, again, when you're taking those tech calls, I mean, I think you're getting a good taste for it, that a lot of times helping them solve the problem is just slowing the process down and taking them through their paces to determine what the right solution is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you actually get down to it and are looking at how much these, especially these Legion mixes, can handle, it's shocking. As a plumber, it was almost blasphemy to take, say, you got an 1.5 inch hot and cold line coming in, getting mixed through a 1-inch valve body. It's just red flags everywhere. But when you actually do the calcs, and that's what it winds up being, that's where it's happiest.
Right. Well, and that's where, we'll get a lot of calls, and guys want to, they'll call and they'll start out, well, what's your warranty process? Because I've got a bad valve, and it's like, I just installed, and I'm like, okay, how old is it? Well, I just put it in. Okay, well, I mean, there's a reason it's not performing.
Right.
I mean, very rarely is it a bad product coming out of the box. More often than not, it's an application problem with, the valve not being happy and performing the way it should because of how it's being used.
Yeah, the sizing is critical. And it's tough to get, even out of a new job. A lot of the engineers are cut and paste with what they're putting in the spec. Because it's a spec job, they just, use this one because I know it works.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But they're never really going through, or maybe they are, or somebody is, but none of that information is made available to the guy that's going to install it. So he looks at it like everybody's doing. It's an 1.5 inch pipe. I'm going to put an 1.5 inch valve in. Mm-hmm. That's where we end up kind of taking the bull by the horns and talking through the job with some of these guys and really trying to focus on a real life situation number.
Well, we'll have designers send us specs, where it'll say, maybe a competitor's valve or some generic, you can tell it's cut and paste specs on a valve, and, we kind of have to push them to go back and get more information,
Yeah, and either we don't hear from them again because the engineer doesn't want to give them the numbers, or we do hear from them, or they don't know.
Yeah.
So then we end up kind of helping them out along the way. Mm-hmm. Let's do a fixture count in this thing. What do we think the real world scenario is? Are we going to use a third of those fixtures at once? And how long are we going to use them for?
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
And that's another rabbit hole we can dive down in another episode, because I did talk with an engineer, and there's there's many different ways of trying to figure this out, and nothing's really set in concrete, and it's a little confusing.
Yeah, it definitely can be.
Another thing that should really be considered, too, is the minimum flow rate through these valves. That winds up being a lot of the calls, too, that we get, because there is actually quite, let's say, like on an 1.5 inch Legion mix, that minimum flow rate is 6.6 GPM. So, that's at zero use. That's a hefty chunk of water. That's got it. Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's a lot of flow. And I think that's one thing that people don't take into consideration is a minimum flow. A lot of people may look at, design flow rate or max flow rate, but you got to realize that everything's got a minimum flow rate too.
Yeah, anytime you're talking a high flow mixing valve of any kind, it's not just ours, it's everybody. It's everybody's. You got to read the fine print and really dive into the spec, and sometimes the information's not very easy to find.
Right, so you got to make sure you get that valve piped and have the right system in place to help meet that minimum flow rate, so that at a time of low or no use, you're able to still maintain.
Right. And I know it's blasphemous, but whenever we tell a guy he needs a 3/4 inch valve in we'll say an 1.5 inch line, when we tell him to install that thing, the best thing to do is put your reducers right off the union fittings.
Right at those tail pieces.
Yeah, that way you don't have, we've seen some installs where there's, 2+ feet of small pipe, and then they go into the big pipe on their reducing fittings, and that's really not going to be very, very good towards the end of the system's life. You got to worry about erosion, corrosion in the piping.
Yeah, well, you got to worry about the velocity, because there's, you're putting a valve in that can handle a certain flow rate. Say you're putting in a 2-inch Legio mix and a design flow rate of 131 gallons per minute. Right. Well, a 2-inch pipe isn't going to be happy at 131 GPM to keep your velocity right and not create that erosion corrosion. So you have to upsize that piping to to be able to handle the 131 GPM at an appropriate velocity.
Yeah, and that's another one we can talk about too is maximum flow rates versus what the actual copper pipe can handle.
Right.
Valves can handle a lot more than the pipe can.
Right. Yeah, with copper pipe, you don't want to exceed 5 feet per second for the UPC. So, you need 131 GPM. You start pushing that through a 2-inch pipe, which our valve can handle. You're not gonna meet codes. So you have to upsize the piping to handle that within the 5 feet per second or less. But then you want to run that piping right up to the body and reduce.
Exactly.
Sizing really comes into play with all of our products. I mean, it's just,
yeah,
it's very important to know what you're looking for, pick the right product, and if you're not sure, call us.
Yeah. Either me, Dan, or Matt, we're happy to help you out.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, we'll spend the time.
We got to know Matt a little bit. We talked a little bit about oversizing and got into the weeds a little bit some more about other things. So tune in next time. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning in. If you ever need help,
please feel free to contact our tech support team anytime at techsupport.us@caleffi.com.
or call us during our business hours at 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Central Time at 414-238-2360.